I'm a Ramblin' wreck from Georgia Tech and a hell of an engineer. A hell of an engineer. Like all the jolly good fellows, I drink my whiskey clear. I'm a Ramblin' wreck from Georgia Tech and a hell of an engineer. Well, if I had a dollar cellar, I'd dress her in white and gold and put her on the canvas to cheer the brave and bold. Well, if I had a song cellar, I'd tell you what he'd do. He would yell to hell with Georgia, like his daddy used to do. I wish I had a barrel of rum and sugar 3,000 pounds, a collar's bell to put it in, and clapper to stir it round. I drink to all good fellows who come from far and near. I'm a ramblin', gamblin', hell of an engineer. Hey!
So what is your first memory of being around airplanes or wanting to be a pilot?
Well, when I was, I guess I had to be between 5 and 10 years old. They still had barnstormers running around. And I lived in South Georgia. We didn't have an airport, so they'd land in a empty pasture. And my dad paid the fee, and we went to ride in a couple of biplanes. I don't know what they were. And also an old Ford Trimotor. That's the only experience that I ever had with an airplane until I got in the military in 1943. Yeah, I went to college in 1938.
Okay.
And the war started in 41, of course. And I was going to Georgia Tech and in Atlanta. And I had a difficulties, polite word for it, finding enough funds to pay my way. But I had learned how to play a saxophone and clarinet when I was going through school. Got a call from one of the big bands in Atlanta. And that was during the time the big bands were playing, and they had tea dances and weekend dances and everything. And I made enough money for the next 3 years that I paid my way through school without a problem.
When did you graduate?
1942.
Okay.
And they graduated us. They graduated us early.
Upon graduating from Georgia Tech in 1942, Floyd received a job offer from the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, the forerunner to today's NASA. With the war going on, however, he was unsure of what to do, take the job at NACA or join the military. So he sought advice in a letter to Secretary of War Henry Stimson.
And he wrote me back. He said, well, you're not in the Army till you take the oath of office. And once you do, you're in the Army, but until then, do what you want to.
So what was your decision? Did you go with NACA or did you?
No, I took the oath of office and immediately got some orders to report to training center in San Antonio. And I was assigned. That was when they were just starting to build what's now Lackland Air Force Base. And so I went out there, and to make a long story short, I went out there and most of the officers that I knew, as a matter of fact, I was renting a room. I was living off base from one of the officers, but most of the Army Air Corps officers at that time were pilots. So I went in and went to reported for Kelly Field was the name
Kelly?
of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And they told me, these officer friends that I started making, said, if you're ever going to get anywhere in the Air Corps, you got to be a pilot.
Upon entering flight training, Floyd made the usual progression through the Army's primary, basic, and advanced trainers before moving into fighters.
They gave me 10 hours in a P-40. So I checked out the P-40. Then I went from there to Waltersboro, South Carolina, where I was flying P-39s. And then they sent me down to Venice for P-47 training. And in December, I think it was, of 1943, I got orders for me to report to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And to make a long story short, that was supposed to be a replacement training center.
Right.
We were supposed to train the pilots, and they were going to be shipped out. Some outfit out in Texas didn't pass the overseas inspection, so they said, well, we're going to, I didn't know any of this one, because they didn't call me up and tell me what's happening. We had a guy named McAlpin come in, and he was a lieutenant colonel. He had been a RAF pilot with a, he was American, but he had flown with RAF. We got this notice that the outfit was going overseas. Well, here again, all we knew, we were going overseas, but what they were doing is a build-up for the invasion. So they called me in, though. Colonel Johnson, who was the deputy commander, called me in and said that they were going to have to ship me out. I couldn't go with them. And I said, why? He said, you're not qualified to fly with this outfit. You had to have a minimum of 500 hours in a fighter to qualify to go with that outfit. Some of them had up into the thousands of hours.
About how many did you have at that time?
What did I have? 350. I kept going by and bugging him so much. Then he finally said, okay, you can go.
On January 20th, 1944, the 404th received the official order that they would deploy to the European Theater of Operations. On March 13th, after countless checks and inspections, group personnel boarded a troop train bound for Camp Shanks, the staging area for the New York port of embarkation. 9 days later, they boarded the British cargo liner Stirling Castle and sailed for England as part of a 30-ship convoy.
Yeah, we arrived on the 4th and then rode a train down to Christchurch in South England and started checking the airplanes out. They were shipping the P-47. We didn't know what we were going to get till we got there.
What were you hoping to get?
A lot of them were looking to get that airplane back there. That was the hottest thing going. That would have been the worst thing for what we wound up doing that we could have had. Because you can shoot that thing down with a rifle if you're good enough shot.
By April 16, 1944, the 404th had received a full complement of 75 Thunderbolts, two-thirds of which were brand new P-47Ds, with the remaining third being older C and D models. The squadron that received the older types was decided in a very simple and fair manner.
The older airplanes went to the 506. All the squadron commanders flipped coins, and the 506 lost. And I had a brand new airplane. We had to break them in, engine time and height time. One of the things I had to do is take that airplane up 42,000 feet. I never did make that. I got to 40 and decided I was high enough. So, and then we flew that way. May 1st, we flew the first combat mission.
And that was a sweep to Normandy, right?
Yeah.
Does anything in particular stick out about that first mission you flew?
Yeah, it scared the hell out of everybody. Everybody was all over the sky. No, we kept formation, though. But I tell you, when it's different when you're flying around the field and there's nobody trying to kill you. When they start shooting at you, that changes everything. So.
In early May, the group began to receive intelligence on what was described as rocket gun or ski sites that were positioned along the rocket gun coast between Calais and Dieppe. These were the V-1 launching sites, and a mission against these targets was codenamed No Ball, and the 404th flew their first No Ball mission on May 9, 1944.
Well, we were assigned before the invasion. We had knew where the Germans had these rocket launchers, and we did fly dive bombing missions against them. And we had interdiction missions we would fly over and bomb bridges and shoot up trains and staff cars if we could find them. I had a pass to go into town on a Friday night, and I went into Bournemouth, and I went over there, which was a short distance away, and I came back in on a Sunday night, and when I walked through the guard, by the guardhouse on the way in, the sergeant says, "Lieutenant, when you come in this base, you're confined to base till further notice." Then I found out they were painting these airplanes. Some of them got stripes on them here. And on Monday night, all of us got called in to a group briefing about 10 o'clock at night. They explained that the invasion was on. We were assigned to fly fighter cover over the beachhead. Colonel McAlpin got up and said, "This is our assignment." And the group has 4 missions tomorrow. Turned out that I flew the second mission and the 4th one. And he said, we do not know how the Germans are going to react. And if they show up, you're to shoot everybody down. If you run out of ammunition and they're still around, you're to ram them. Now, everybody was sitting there looking around, but when he said that, everybody woke up. So when I got back to the base on the last mission, it was dark. That was on the 6th, the night of the 6th. And it was pitch black dark, and we couldn't have any lights on. We were still flying formations. And we came in over the runway and peeled off. And to this day, I wake up in the middle of the night and think about how did I find that runway? But I flew a pattern, and way down there through the windshield, I could see a red light. And I thought to myself, man, if you think I'm going to go around tonight, you're crazy. So I kept dragging that thing in, and all of a sudden I saw a light change. Finally, it changed to green. And about that time, I went over the edge of the runway. And then the next day I flew the second and third mission. On the 8th, we did start doing ground support. And it was a learning curve for everybody. End of June and into July, they decided that the chain of command wasn't fast enough to handle this ground support thing. So what they did, General Quesada and the people that were flying, I don't mean just ordinary pilots, I mean people like McCall and the group commanders, that they had to do something. And what they did, they put the same radio in the tanks and gave it to the infantry that we had in the airplane. And after that, we'd take off and we'd call the guy on the ground and he'd tell us what to do. You got to know the controller by his voice and everything.
What was did you normally carry bombs or did you carry rockets at any point?
No, our squadron never got rockets. The 508th had rockets. And we would have either 3 500-pound bombs, or we had, on some missions, not very often, but we could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs, one on each wing, or 3 500s under the wing in the center section of the airplane. And we also carried all kinds of different bombs. Other than that, frag bombs, we even dropped napalm when we ran out of explosive bombs.
Now your next base that you moved to in August, is that Brittany?
Brittany, yeah, it was an old German air base, and we lived in a French chateau there. Up until then, we were living in tents, which is not any fun in the wintertime, I'll tell you. But it's nothing compared to what those poor guys in the infantry and the tank corps did. Man, if there were any heroes in the war, they were it. We flew cover on market guard.
Just fighter cover or
yeah.
support?
That was the best. Those poor guys, I really felt sorry for them. Montgomery, that was his crazy idea, and we came in, and the Germans had mounted a huge counterforce, and on that mission, my squadron was the top cover on and I happened to look behind us, and I saw all these funny-looking airplanes with spirals. They weren't very. I didn't laugh very loud because they were ME-109s. And we had a guy that became an ace during that battle. I wasn't one of them, but he shot down 6 planes in that fight. I was busy trying to fly this guy's wing, who almost ran through me when I called out these planes. He turned that big old P-47 on the side like that, and I had barely got out of his way.
When the Battle of the Bulge started, you were in Belgium, right?
Yes, sir.
And you were socked in with weather for quite a bit of time, weren't you?
Yeah, it was. When they started, they knew that front was coming in. The Germans did, and one of the guys came in just before just getting dark. He came in and said that he saw some German tanks and he pointed out where it was, and it was in that area, and everybody thought he was crazy. But of course, we didn't even fly. You couldn't see that truck over there. Man, those poor guys on the ground. We got a fellow that lives here, used to live here, Doug Oswald, who was in the infantry. And he was, while I was sleeping in that German barracks back in St. Tron at night, he was sleeping in a foxhole, frozen, man. He and I got to be pretty good friends, and we'd go out to lunch together. And every time I'd go with him, he'd tell me, he'd say, well, I used to wave at you every morning when you went over. Once we got airborne, we were assigned areas, and we'd go over and call the ground controller, and they'd tell us what to do. And as a matter of fact, that was routine with us. Well, we moved in April. We went to Kelts, which is right across. It was a field, and they went in and put this plank down. But all I remember about Kelts, we were back in tents, and it was miserable. And the airplanes were slogging around in the mud. That P-47 didn't seem to care. That's when I hit my 100th mission. When I did, I went in and told them that I shouldn't be flying anymore. They said, we don't care, but you can't go home. But we were still in Belgium then. I had formed this dance band, and we had a dance every Saturday night, and they said, if you go home, we can't have any more dances, so you got to stay home. But I got out of there. I got on the boat coming on May the 8th, the day the war ended.
Floyd's empathy for the ground troops and overall modesty were obvious, but don't let his self-deprecating manner fool you. He was an accomplished fighter pilot and flight leader. During his 100 combat missions, he was awarded 16 Air Medals, Distinguished Flying Cross, campaign medals for Normandy, Northern France, Rhineland, and the Ardennes, Belgian Forager and French Croix de Guerre with Palms, and the 404th Fighter Group was awarded the Distinguished Unit Citation.
When I got out, I got called back in. I stayed in reserves. I got 10 years, 5 of it active duty and 5 years reserve. Got called back up during the Korean War. And I was in a reserve unit in Miami. And there was a troop carrier. It was a transportation outfit. And I wanted to get in jets. So they got a directive in there and asked the commander there if he had any fighter pilots. So I talked him into letting me go, and I went out to Denver, Colorado, fly F-80s, and when a friend of mine that got assigned the same place, we went through the gate, we went straight to the flight line because we wanted to see one of those F-80s. We drove to the flight line, and guess what was out there? Those things. One jet on the field.
So did you ever check out in the F-80?
I never even got to sit in one. So they let me go to 9th Air Force Tactical Air Command, needed electrical engineers. So I wound up, that's what I did.
It has been written that Floyd named his P-47's Ramblin wreck because he was a graduate of Georgia Tech. But at the end of the interview, he gave a more amusing reason.
That airplane, when we got it, it stayed in the hangar for about 2 or 3 weeks, everybody, they started calling it Hair Queen. And when they assigned me the airplane, it showed you what they thought about me. So they gave me the airplane. I said, well, I'm going to call it Ramblin' Wreck. And it had no relationship. He was just, like, I had a lot of nicknames. Some of them I shall not repeat.
Gambling, hell of an engineer. Hey!